Welcome to Terminal B's Bits and Bytes video series. We know IT can sometimes be a bit overwhelming and confusing, so we break things down into bite-sized bits and simplify IT for you. Hello everyone, welcome to another Terminal B's Bits and Bytes video. I'm here with Greg Bebo, the owner of Terminal B, and we are going to dig into what is included in managed services. We're going to dig into the various levels and match them up with various needs and budgets. I know a lot of people have considered this, but they're not really quite sure what is exactly included. There's lots of variances. So we are here to clear that up for everybody. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, David. How are you?
Good, good, good. This should be a fun video. I'm with business development here, and I'm talking with people, and a lot of times people just are not quite sure what's right for them, what's included, because the prices can range drastically, and as they should, because needs range drastically. So why don't you help guide people with an understanding of what's managed services, what's included there, and how it might be the right fit for them or not.
Sure. So, we like to say at Terminal B, we have IT services for wherever firms are on their IT journey. And the reason we say that is because, firms can start out very small, they can grow to be very large, they can scale back and become very small again. And all the while, the needs of the organization change each time the size or maturation of the firm changes. We have several offerings that kind of plug in based on the needs of the organization. And a lot of that, our first offering is based on just providing tools to firms that need to make sure their security is in order. These are firms that probably have IT support internally, but they leverage firms like Terminal B for the economies of scales of the tools that we have with all of our clients. They have admin access to these tools. And additionally, they have a firm like Terminal B that can backstop them. It's typically advantageous for smaller firms that have limited resources to deal with one vendor than, say, deal with each tool, the vendor for each tool. It's easier to go to one firm for those needs. So an
So,
example,
go ahead.
just to give you an example of what that might apply to, this might be a firm that, this might be a construction firm that has a dedicated IT resource, and that resource handles all their IT needs. But in terms of making sure core tools are properly applied and in use, they would come to an outside firm to make sure that they're getting the best pricing for those tools, and they're working with a vendor that knows those tools inside and out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when would somebody not quite even have a need for tools? Is that even a situation? I'm sure if you're a three-person company, maybe not, 5,
Yeah,
10, 20.
yeah,
Like when does it not quite, they're not quite ready? Because I really want to help guide people, not, necessarily do business with us or anybody else for that matter on an IT partner, but at some point they might. And I really want to help guide people to, like, that's going to be me, you know in January of 2025, or that's me right now, right? So I'm just trying to help identify, because I know I've, been a business owner in the past, and there's just so much to think about and you don't
yeah,
quite know.
yep,
So how can we kind of paint that picture of, like, 'cause when you hear tools, you're like, I'm not an IT person. You, on the other hand, know that, like, oh my goodness, these help out in all these different areas, but it still might be overkill. And at the same time, it might be like necessary yesterday. So how can we help, paint that picture?
so tools are important, and the tools that I'm speaking of are primarily security and productivity tools. They come become more important as an organization grows because they're not reliant on a person to do the things that the tool. In some cases, no employee could handle dual factor authentication. That's just not possible. And that's one of the tools that I'm referring to. But in others, in terms of keeping your systems up to date and stuff, that requires a little bit of elbow grease. So as the case with all evaluation of IT services, you need to make sure that you have the appropriate capacity on staff. What I mean by that is that can't pretend that IT things are never going to happen. If there's someone on staff that has the capacity to address those, then that works out. So long as that's not keeping that person from their job and it's not taking so long that it's keeping other people from their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
The other factor, of course, and we've discussed this in the past, is experience. That you could have someone internally that is responsible for IT, but they just lack the experience and the technology being used to effectively administer or um, uh, leverage the tools for the organization. And so in the case of tools, we do offer just that. It's a managed set of tools that we roll out. Sysadmins or IT staff would have access to that to administer the tools internally, and we exist behind the scenes to help them do more with less.
So they
Typically, is a
get the
nice.
economies of scale. So that would apply to any size company using it, right?
Mhm.
Even if you're super large, you might as well
Yep.
go through us or somebody else like us because they're getting the economies of scale and they have the relationships with the vendors and there's money to be
Right. We don't want to
saved there.
reinvent. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's certainly possible, and it's certainly, you can certainly hire for operational maturity, but again, we don't want to reinvent the wheel when these things are out there at and affordably priced.
Okay. So just tools right there, people need them, just logical.
Yeah. So
Uh,
the next
the
evolution
next
then,
level.
yeah. So the
Yep.
next level comes in two flavors, and that is we have the tools in place, but our in-house staff, whether you've heard me refer to the de facto IT guy or gal or a dedicated IT resource, does not have the capacity. They have the experience, but they don't have the capacity to do all that's needed in the organization. And so we have two flavors that come as the next level, and that is what we call tools plus support or help desk and tools plus sysadmin. And this really gives organizations the ability to plug in gaps that they may have. What do I mean by that? A lot of firms that we come across that have IT resources internally, they tend to be very high level IT resources. They're used to administer software that they may have. They tend to be very focused on security. And so they're not the best use to be resetting passwords and creating new users, doing more of the plumbing, right? So in that case, tools plus help desk would be most appropriate because their time is not consumed by activities that are not really the best use of their time. The flip side of that is that you have IT staff or a de facto person that is primarily able to help people on a help desk level, but the experience doesn't exist that they need at the upper end of services where there's servers that need care and feeding or software applications that need care and feeding, networking, stuff like that. So that's why we have tools plus sysadmin. Either of those flavors they slot in nicely, provides the tools that sysadmins love, management has peace of mind about, and in fact, the insurance companies love. And you combine that with gap filling on either the help desk level or the sysadmin level. Some firms don't have any de facto IT guy, or they've realized that de facto is not okay anymore, and they either don't have budget or they don't have the desire to put their eggs in one basket with a hire. They will engage a firm like Terminal B for full-fledged managed services, which includes the tools, the help desk, and the sysadmin. We work with firms in all different industries in each of those capacities, really doing what's best for the organization, slotting in where they need assistance. And again, it may not, any firm will benefit from the operational maturity of a managed services provider because it's all that they do. So even if you're just using them for a slice of, to fill a gap, they're bringing a level of maturity to that piece of the puzzle that otherwise may not be there.
No, that's really helpful. Love to move into some examples. I mean, I really feel like you really explained that really well. But I would love to give some exact examples, almost like what Jeff
Okay.
Foxworthy, you may be a redneck if, right? You may need tools if, right? And then we're going to ask tools in sysadmin, tools in help desk, tools sysadmin in help desk, right?
Yep.
Let's help put somebody on the other side of this or listening. This is you, and then if it's not you, then you don't need it. So you're good. But you may need tools if what? Let's give some examples and
Sure.
then we'll do each level.
Sure. Typically, the need for tools only comes up when sysadmins are evaluating tools in the marketplace and they realize the cost of each of these tools individually and the learning curve on each of these tools individually.
Okay.
Um, this is it's highly encouraged that sysadmins take advantage of the legwork and the experience of managed service provider to see what is really tried and tested in the marketplace. Again, this is what the only thing that not the only thing, but most of what managed service providers do. So it's not just a sales, it's actually managed service providers also look to keep ticket counts down. And by using these very same tools, you're benefiting from, kind of what's the core of all managed services, and that is effective tool use within the organization to make sure that your focus is not on individual tool sets, but on the overall administration of the network.
So
And
to
so,
break that down, if you're at the stage of your company maturity where you're starting to look at some of these, no befores and in other, even Microsoft 365 or Azure or whatever, if you're starting to understand that you need those things and you're looking at them, take a pause, call us, go online, find a different managed service company because they could potentially give you a bundled package that'll be less, right? So that's an immediate indicator. Stop, go look, see what happens. Now, on the flip side of that, when somebody might not quite be ready for that yet, but they're growing into that maybe 3, 6, 9, 12, 2 years away.
yeah, so if they're not ready for that, for tools, we offer the tools only as an entry point for firms to make sure that their security is in order, really. These are our tools really address wide concerns over security. The tools that we include are dual factor system patching, training in form of security training, and the last one is the 24 by 7 endpoint management and detection and monitoring and response. Um, and so those basic tools, an organization has to decide that they're ready for those. Unfortunately, a lot of times when it happens, it's after a breach. Something happens on a security incident, there's a security incident, the organization says, why don't we have these tools in place? The IT person says, well, we didn't have the budget for that. And then
Mm-hmm.
they're directed to go out into the marketplace and get those tools in place because the insurance company said so. But that doesn't really account for the embarrassment of a breach, the exposure of data in a breach, any of the costs associated with recovering from a breach. And so waiting for that event to happen, you certainly could play the odds, but it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So I would argue that unless you have, some of the tools can be done with a little elbow grease at the early stages, but following that, there's, absence of those, there are specific tools that every organization needs to be using. And so
Okay,
what we do is we offer those tools in a bundled way so that it doesn't cost organizations as much as it would if they bought them individually.
understood. All right, let's scale up. You might need, if you need tools and let's start with help desk, sysadmin's the next layer up. Tools and help desk, if this sounds like you, describe a company who
Okay.
would be a good candidate and describe somebody who, they don't need that, they got it covered.
Okay, so tools plus help desk comes, there's a couple different ways that slots in. One is the organization has a high level sysadmin on staff, and
Okay.
they even though there's someone on staff internally, they have hit a ceiling. And the level of expertise that person brings to the table points them towards the higher end work in the organization as it relates to IT. So doing help desk requests, it's not beneath them, and it's certainly not, below their, above their expertise. but it's not the best use of that internal resources time. So for example, if you have your software company and you have an internal IT resource that's focused on compliance, for example, you're a medical software company and you have your higher level IT resource is focused on compliance. You have to make sure that your organization complies with HITRUST or HIPAA or any of the others. You may not have the bandwidth to change passwords. And so we're enabling a lower cost tool set with the option to bundle that into a help desk so that person can then focus on their job, which is
Gotcha. So
compliance.
you have a super high level person, so you might be thinking we got it covered, but you don't, I mean, it's not, I hear what you said, and not beneath them, but really though, you ideally you want people doing their most valuable work,
Yeah, it's not the
and
best use of their time.
it's not the best use of their time, but so the expertise is there, but not the bandwidth. Um, I
Now, the
guess
flip side of that
the
is,
flip side of that is where, I guess, nice segue, right?
yeah,
Tools plus sysadmin.
right. So tools plus sysadmin, let's say we have a
Tons of
commercial,
bandwidth, but not the expertise. Go ahead though.
right. So let's say tools plus sysadmin for a commercial construction company per se. Let's say that they have a lower a less qualified technical resource that is on staff, that is primarily designed, whose role is primarily to make sure people's systems are running, which they're responsible for setting up new computers, they're responsible for password resets, they're responsible for decommissioning users, stuff of that nature. Typically, those are the individuals that say, hey, I'm not qualified to do this higher end stuff. And so that's when it makes sense. Again, we have the same tools in place to provide that, the more economical baseline, if you will. And then we allow them to do all the end user support and they engage us for sysadmin. So in that case, the resource has what they need on both ends of the spectrum, from a lower end in terms of tool set and from a higher end in terms of advanced networking, advanced system administration. It could be related to compliance and security, any of those things where the resource that's internal has identified that there are things being asked of them, or the organization could have identified this, that they value the employee, they don't want the employee to go anywhere, but their needs exceed the capacity and experience of that one help desk person. That's when we would layer on sysadmin as well.
Understood.
The
And
cool
then the
thing,
full, go
the,
ahead.
the cool thing about, yeah, I was just going to say, the cool thing about these is that it's designed to accommodate the organization wherever they are, right? So
Yeah.
if in fact that IT resource goes to another job and the organization says, well, they can reevaluate their priorities, where they say, okay, you know what, this time we're going to hire for sysadmin, and then Terminal B can slot down and do tools plus help desk. So it gives organizations the ability to say, the most important thing for us is X. The most important
Mm-hmm.
thing for us is the responsiveness of our help desk. So they focus then on the help, or it could be a cost basis thing, right? Well, it's less expensive for us to hire a help desk resource. So we're going to do that, and we're going to outsource the sysadmin portion because it's more expensive to have that resource full-time on staff. So
Makes
the cool
complete
thing is
sense.
that, and then there's all the way up to full managed services, right? Which is you need both the help desk and the sysadmin.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the cool thing is that we can kind of fluctuate based on what's going on with the organization at that time. The least expensive being tools only, the most expensive being full managed services.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's based on where the organization is in its life cycle. What is actually needed? What does the organization think they need? And of course, we have conversations with our clients about this all the time. This is what we hear you saying, and we feel that this is the best way to accomplish your goals.
So on the flip side of all of this, and again, this isn't unique to us as an organization. This is industry wide, pretty much. What's not included? What are some things that people think? They sign up, with us or anybody, in Timbuktu or whomever, and they have a misperception that managed services should also be included in what? So what are some things where, just to set expectations for the industry, what's not sometimes included in managed services that people think it, normally is?
Yeah, so the whole concept of managed services, it's evolved from the break fix model where everything was hourly and parts and labor and all of that stuff. It got too expensive, so the onus has shifted back on the managed service provider to be effective with their use of time, which is where the operational maturity comes in. When you're working with the managed service provider, they know how things need to work,
Mm-hmm.
and they can only make it a flat fee, which is the case in most situations. They can only make it a flat fee if they know what the outcomes are going to be. So I am I know internally we work to eliminate any variability that could we work hard to eliminate any variability that could throw wildcards up that would create more greater need for support. Let's see here.
I'm more talking about like sometimes say you are utilizing, let's pick a common software out there like Salesforce CRM. Is it to be expected to, that's part of the environment that, is, the environment is being taken care of, but like, how do I do this with Salesforce or how do I do that? Like,
Yeah, yeah. So where I was going is that one of the things is use of the products, right? So a managed services provider's job is to make sure that the products work as function as they should, they function as they should, and they're accessible to employees that should have access to them. Their job is not to instruct on how to use the software, right? So
okay.
those tend to be more internal things and things between that's really a training issue.
Mm-hmm.
While we do provide some training and we have training portals, Salesforce is a great example. A managed service provider is not going to go in and instruct you on how to use Salesforce. One, because don't have the expertise for that. And two, it falls into more business consulting and business use and actually gets very specific with the applications. Where managed service providers can help in that regard is that they interface with the vendor. Managed service providers very much want to be that phone call. They want you to call them first because the chances are to resolve any issues that you have, it involves technology that the
Mm-hmm.
managed service provider is responsible for. Um, so that's something that the training on specific application packages is something they're not going to make things work for you. That's typically separate. They're not going to configure a particular software for your business case. That's separate. I mean, those are things that can be done, but they're typically not included in managed services. The other thing that I'll add about managed services is that um, when an environment exists for a managed services provider, it's looked at as the whole environment. And when things change in that environment, that changes the managed service agreement in a sense. And what do I mean by that? New systems that are inserted into your network, replacement machines, things that change the network, things that are introduced to the network typically are not included, right? There, the way we do it and the way most managed service providers do it is that anything new in the environment, there's a cost associated with that. But then once that cost is incurred, it becomes part of the environment that's being managed. So you don't have to revisit it in the future. There's maybe a one-time fee to get something set up or integrated or retired if something's coming out. And then the environment, there's no further charges after that. So I think those are two excellent examples. Specific use of software and any introductions or reductions in an environment.
Gotcha. Well, I think we've covered a lot. Do you have any parting thoughts? Anything else you want to leave us on? But I do hope that we have helped people understand a little bit more about managed services because it can be confusing. There's tools, there's, what the traditional help desk, which again, just for clarity, that's, to break it down, that's when you call, the overseas numbers sometimes for like Microsoft or whatever and get a one-off person to help you. That's a help desk. Obviously, good companies, good proper managed service companies is going to have a much more efficient help desk, but that's to take care of knick-knack stuff. I need help, you call a help desk, right? And sysadmin is higher level, making sure whole environments are safe, data security, cybersecurity, all of that would be underneath that. So hopefully we painted some clarity there, because I understand it can be very confusing. But Greg, you have any parting thoughts, or I think we covered it well?
I think we did a good job and covered a lot of good points.
All right, awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time, and on to the next one.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you.